Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane, and it's the morning of Wednesday, the 20th of March, 2019. And as you can, or maybe can't see, until somebody tries to call me again. Anyway, it's a thick mist up here on the edge of the East Lancashire moors, which hopefully means, which pretty much has brought visibility down to about 20 odd meters, but hopefully that means it's going to be a pretty nice day. Anyway, the title of this morning's broadcast is that the world is nothing more than an experiment in human dumbfuckery, because with everything that's unfolding right now, it's pretty clear that the ruling establishment, the globalist parasites, are pretty much working on the basis that they have got the general population right where they want them. In other words, they can pull any stunt they like, and basically no one's going to care. And even the few that do care, basically the establishment give the finger, because they work on the basis that, you know what, there's a few of you out there, we know there's probably, a few tens of thousands who know precisely what's going on. A few tens of thousands who know that basically we, the ruling parasitics who sit in office such as Parliament or in the boardrooms of the global corporations, knowing fine well that they can basically do whatever they want to feather their own nest, to dig their snouts even deeper in the trough. And even though it is often broadcast or alluded to in the mainstream media and spelt out in words of one syllable in the alternative media, basically there's not enough of you to do anything about it. And that's the attitude of these parasites. And, in New Zealand on Monday, obviously just a few hours, or a couple of days rather, after the events in New Zealand, then Jacinda Ardern, the 37-year-old Prime Minister of New Zealand, who's had a meteoric rise to national office ever since taking on the leadership of the International Youth Socialists back in 2008, when coincidentally she was also working as a policy advisor to none other than the war criminal Tony Blair. And prior to that, she had been working in the office of Helen Clark, the former New Zealand Prime Minister, who was then gifted a role at the UN in return for her fulfilling the New World Order agenda as set out for New Zealand, which many believe is ultimately going to be the destination for the parasites if the wider population wake up, because it's quite possibly one of the remotest locations on the planet. Of course, it's absolutely stunningly beautiful. It's certainly about 3 hours flying time from Sydney. And, what better way to ensure that the parasites could, should they need, go to New Zealand and not be under any threat than removing all firearms. And this is the knee-jerk reaction, of course, to what occurred on Saturday, despite there being an apparent lack of any real evidence as to why this event took place. Of course, we're hearing all the usual stuff about white supremacy, etc., etc. But, there's some interesting stuff emerging here. The New Zealand police have advised that anyone caught sharing the live-streamed video from the events on Saturday potentially faces anything from 12 plus years in jail. Now, I haven't seen the entire video, but the bits that I have seen, it is quite easy to see why the establishment are desperate for that video not to get wider circulation, because there are certainly elements of that video that do not appear to support the narrative that is emerging from New Zealand. Now, I don't profess to know what occurred, but all I'm making the observation is that the elements of the video that I have seen do not support the official narrative. And this, of course, is so common with this type of event. Now, some other interesting stuff is emerging, and in fact, New Zealand has attempted to prevent people from reading the Zero Hedge posting on this event. And of course, Zero Hedge very much makes the observation that an incident in the North Korean embassy in Madrid, in which there seemed to be a desire to steal documents that might derail the talks between Trump and Kim Jong-il. So whether or not that stands up to forensic examination remains to be seen. But the observation is there. And it also has been observed that Brenton Tarrant would seem to have a very interesting background. And there are also certain allegations that, or suggestion that he's not completely unknown to the security services. So, as is always the case, the longer these events have taken place, then the more information starts to emerge as more and more people start to dig through the official narrative and compare that with the evidence that's in the public domain. So right now, Jacinda Ardern is performing exactly as per the gamed script. And the New Zealand population obviously still in shock that such an event should befall Christchurch. I think on Monday I said Wellington, senior moment there. It was, of course, in Christchurch. And of course, Christchurch does seem to get more than its fair share of trauma. It was less than a decade ago since the earthquakes devastated large chunks of Christchurch. And of course, those earthquakes occurred very shortly after visits from officials from the World Bank who were trying to persuade John Keys that he needed to borrow more money from the World Bank and get New Zealand into hock with the World Bank. To which he responded that actually that was not the New Zealand policy, and that they would try to operate within a balanced budget. To which the response was, well, you will soon find out just how much you need to borrow. And it wasn't long after that that, of course, the earthquakes occurred. Now, I'm not drawing anything from this. Suffice to say that on at least 3 occasions after the Christchurch earthquakes, in separate speeches, John Keys referred to the man-made earthquakes. So this is the asymmetrical war that I was talking about on Monday. This is a war being waged at the very upper echelons of the parasitic elite, because they're not all batting for the same team. And, they will know what's going on, but it's so outrageous, so outrageous, that they know that they can never go public with it, that if they did go public with it, there would be absolute pandemonium. So, they just decide to go along with the official narrative. Now, we're not out of the woods yet, because it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that does any kind of research on this kind of manipulation to know that the 22nd of the month seems to feature very heavily in these type of events. And of course, we're coming up to the 22nd of March, which is 322, which is a number very much associated with Skull and Bones. It's also, of course, the date on which the London Westminster attack allegedly occurred. Well, here we go again, 22nd of March, 2019. So, stay extremely vigilant, because we are coming into a period between the 22nd of March and basically the beginning of May, really, but particularly around the 19th and 20th of April, which in the parasitic calendar of those who believe themselves to be the rightful rulers of a planetary fiefdom is the day of sacrifice by fire. And if you look at the number of events that have occurred on the 19th/20th of April across the years, it's truly remarkable. And, you know, we'll talk about the Waco massacre, the Oklahoma City bombings, the Columbine High School massacre, BP Deepwater Horizon disaster, all apparently unconnected events, yet for whatever reason they all occur on the same dates, of course across different years. So the establishment do know that more and more people are starting to realize the magnitude of the deceit, and those who operate in government as effectively their whores will ultimately be called to account. So do take a look at the Zero Hedge report. Apparently, if you're in New Zealand, that might be a bit risky, because your government does not want you to see some of the connections that disconnected parties, i.e. those that are looking at this totally objectively, without the emotion that obviously is prevalent within New Zealand. They don't want you looking at it. And they certainly don't want you asking questions about what occurred in Madrid and the similarity between the events in Madrid and what occurred on Saturday morning in the mosques, plural, in Christchurch. And of course, all the early reports were that there was multiple people involved, just like in the Norway shootings back in July 22nd of 2011. Which ultimately evaporated, and it came down to the lone gunman, Anders Breivik. And we're seeing a similar situation here in New Zealand. Early reports talking about multiple shooters and even 2 mosques. And yet now it's all coming down, of course, to one man, Brenton Tarrant. And so, you know, let's see how that unfolds. Meanwhile, of course, the experiment in dumbfuckery continues here in the UK as the parliamentarians do their level best to completely derail Brexit. And so now it's being reported that Theresa May is going to seek permission from the EU to extend the Brexit deadline. Well, you know, there are an increasing number of people, even amongst those who initially voted to remain, who are seeing the charade, they're seeing the disdain with which the EU is treating the UK, and now they're simply taking the approach that we just need to get out. We need to get out, and if there's no deal on the table, there's no deal on the table, and the resilience of the nation will come through. And of course, you know, we're starting to see all the BS pumped out, like the UK being a potential target for a Russian invasion. Well, you know, quite frankly, I'd have far more concern about the EU military than I would about a Russian military trying to establish a foothold in the UK. This is far too important for the EU just to allow to manifest, because they know fine well that once Britain does find its feet, once Britain gets out of the EU and operates within the global arena, global economic market, then other countries, particularly Greece and Italy and Spain and Ireland, will realise the extent to which they have been totally shafted by the EU politicians and by the EU banksters, which is why, of course, they're desperate to try and prevent the British exit. But if the British do manage to exit the EU, then they're going to do everything they possibly can to destroy the economy and the culture. And, you know, that actually may not be a bad thing, not the destruction of the economy and culture, but the attempt to do it, because that would hopefully unite the people of this country and get people to step out of their apathy and actually start to participate in the process. And, that's going to mean getting involved in your community, doing something to contribute to your community, to your local community, to your regional community, and to your national community. Because there are parasites who want to condemn you and future generations to lives of absolute abject misery in economic slavery. And unfortunately, of course, that's been going on apace for some time now. So it really is up to each and every one of us to show that their perception that the global population, and in particular the British population, is so dumbed down that they can pull stunts like this, then, maybe they'll start to realise that, actually this needs to be a much more inclusive process than the one which they're attempting to roll out from Westminster right now. So, 29th of March, no deal. Yes, that's the preference of the majority of people in this country. And, the EU can go whistle for their 39 billion. Now, apparently, if there is to be an extension, it needs to be agreed by all 27 heads of state. Now, no doubt, enormous pressure and bribery is going to be offered to the other heads of states to go along with that extension. But what we really need is those countries that ultimately do realise that they need to get out of the EU if they are to protect their economy and their culture. Then hopefully they will resist the attempt by the European Commission and the Council of Ministers to extend the Brexit drama to June and beyond. And of course, if it's extended beyond 2020, then the Treaty of Lisbon kicks in, and that's good night, Irene, to the last vestiges of national sovereignty of any of the European vassal states of the EU. So actually there's a much greater realization of this, of course, in Europe, and that's why we're seeing such massive unrest in France. Anyway, let's come down to a couple of domestic matters here of people who have or are in the process of directly challenging this agenda. And a couple of days ago, Mark Steele launched his crowd justice campaign. Now, I emphasize this is crowd justice. So this is crowd funding that has been initiated by Mark's legal team. So none of the monies raised through crowd justice go to Mark. The funds go directly to the legal team who have picked up on Mark's case. And this is an attempt to challenge the legitimacy of Gateshead Council's rollout of 5G and LED street lighting without undertaking any formal research or investigation, or indeed any kind of due diligence whatsoever regarding the negative health and well-being impacts of 5G and LED street lighting. So obviously, this is the first case of this type, and hopefully it will be the first of many. And regardless of the outcome, then obviously we will learn from this. And just like the anti-fracking community has initiated, I think, something in the region of about 50 legal challenges one way or another over the past few years, and the industry and the government have no idea where that next challenge is coming from. And by the way, of course, this has culminated in Lee Rowley, the MP for North Derbyshire, yesterday succeeding in the first stage of bringing a private members bill to put into law the existing traffic light system, where the fracking companies have to stop as soon as they trigger anything at 0.5 or above, only for 24 hours, but nonetheless, obviously, as it's been proven in Prestonley Road, it's a major problem for the unconventional gas companies, and rightly so. So full credit to Lee Rowley for bringing that private members bill, and I believe that it gets its second reading in a few weeks. So if you can get down to London tomorrow, then Mark Steele and his legal team will be formally launching their campaign. And when I checked this morning, Mark's Crowd Justice campaign had raised over £5,000 in less than 2 days. So clearly, an increasing number of people around the country are starting to realise the significance of the issues surrounding, or potential issues surrounding, 5G and LED street lighting, and do want to see this challenge come about. Now, obviously, in parallel, we also have David Noakes. He's due to be released from Wandsworth on Friday, but I spoke to David a couple of days ago, and David was still unsure as to whether he will be released, and actually he's not expecting to actually have formal confirmation that he's due to be released until somebody comes to his cell and basically tells him that it's time for him to leave. He's not expecting to have any advance notice. So I would love, obviously, to be there and have a welcoming committee for David once he walks out of Wandsworth Jail, but that may not be possible. But the one thing that is for sure is that, of course, Lynn Thayer will be back in the Royal Courts of Justice sometime next week. We're not sure when, but as soon as we know that date, then obviously I will share that with you, and I will do everything I possibly can to be at that hearing. And as I have mentioned previously, as soon as David comes out of Wandsworth, then the French authorities are going to initiate proceedings to have David extradited to France. So, having been sentenced in the UK for the heinous crime of developing and distributing a treatment that proved to be extremely effective for cancer, far too effective for the big pharmaceutical companies who love their revenues that they get from chemo and radiotherapy. And so this persecution of those who are looking to find effective treatments continues apace. And as with 5G, as with LED street lighting, as with the suppression for some 25 years now of GC MAF, this really is a test in global dumbfuckery. But the challenge for each and every one of us is to actually demonstrate that we collectively have been grossly underestimated. And even those who really don't care about what's going on, that doesn't mean to say that we should leave them to the clutches of the ruling parasites. We need collectively to do the right thing for all humanity. So that's it from me, here up on the edge of the East Lancashire moors in thick mist, but hopefully a bit of sun later on. Don't hold your breath. But I will be back at 8:30 on Friday morning, which is March the 22nd, as I say, a date that has a somewhat, how should I say, tragic history. So stay vigilant, because what occurred in New Zealand, and as it becomes increasingly apparent that the evidence does not support the official narrative, then the ruling parasites may well be looking to do something else to take your attention away from New Zealand. What a game, and oh, what tangled webs we weave. Thanks for joining me this morning. I will see you on Friday at 8:30. You take care now.